guys? So if you saw the last video, we tried to do an ignition relocation kit. It was a bad time. So we're gonna try and redeem ourselves by getting rid of these big, ugly, huge, just brutal, ugh, look at that. Brutal handlebars. And we're gonna put on something a little bit more sleek. Stay tuned.
So obviously the first step if you're going to change your Sportster handlebars is to remove the current hand controls. Now what that's going to require is two different Torx drivers. One's going to be a T25 and one's going to be a T27. Essentially you have two different sets. There's the set that clamps to the handlebar, those are really easy to see, and then there's a set that are on the actual controls where the switches are themselves. One is at the top, one is at the bottom. And any product that I do mention, I'm going to make sure to have a link to. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, you'll see what you need in the description box down below. A couple things to keep in mind. What you guys might want to do is you might want to be looking at putting a towel over your gas tank and your fender. I'm not doing this now, but I do it later, and that's just to avoid any kind of scratching or damaging to the bike while you're working on it. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have a magnetic tray, those things are great. They're only a few dollars and it just stops you from losing your nuts and bolts and having to crawl on your hands and knees trying to figure out where you just kicked that thing that you just had in your hand. Lastly, if you're going to be switching to bars that are bigger, I'm talking like 6 inches or more, substantially bigger or further apart or taller, maybe you're going to a Z bar or to a mini ape or to a proper ape hanger handlebar, you're going to want to be changing your cables because the current stock ones will not be long enough. If you're doing that, you may as well switch to steel braided cables, especially for the brake lines. I'll also post a link in the description box about an article on why steel braided lines are better, and if you're going to be working on your bike anyway, now is the time to do that. So once you've taken those two sets of 4 Torx screws off each side, the last thing that you're going to be wanting to do is just the actual clamp that holds the handlebar in place. That's in the center. You're going to see that in just a second. The bike is standard, so you're going to want to make sure that when you're taking a hex key to it that you are in fact using standard and not a metric hex key, or you're going to strip those heads. So you'll see as this loosens up, the handlebar is going to rotate. Handlebar is now off and the new one is lined up. Great website to check out, a great resource is cycleergo.com. I'll throw the description down below, and that actually lets you input what motorcycle you're on, and it loads the stock measurements, and then you can say I'm going to put a handlebar on there that's going to be 3 more inches forward and 6 inches down, or however it is you're switching it up, and it'll actually show you a little stick figure based on your heights, your sizes, that's going to show you how you're going to fit on that motorcycle and what your angles are going to be. And it's great for sort of A/B testing if you want to see how different positions, different handlebars, different risers are going to work for you. I will link in the box below. So right now I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting that handlebar as close to how I saw it, how I wanted it on Cycle Ergo as I can get. The last step before we put it all back together is to just try and get a look at where your grips are going to go, how your controls are going to go. Make sure your cables aren't, in my case, too long and in the way. I'm just trying to get a sense to make sure everything fits. I'm looking at where the handlebars have been knurled. You should make sure that yours are knurled if you're going to be putting these on a Harley-Davidson Sportster. Sportsters work a little bit different. I'll also post a description to an article on what kind of handlebar you should be getting for a Harley-Davidson. And of course, answering a phone call from mom because, mom takes priority over motorcycles. So, mom, if you're watching this, I love you. Now, when you get your new grips on the bars, you're going to want to pay attention to make sure that you are putting the right grip on the right side, because one of them is made to work with your throttle and the other one is not. In my case, I got some really awesome grips. I could have used the old ones, but I just decided I could have used the old ones using some compressed air to get them off, but they were kind of glued on and they were really bulky, really ugly. And honestly, a grip change just does such a cheap way of refreshing the look of your bike even more than a handlebar swap. Well, maybe not even more, but just as much. And I thought, you know what, I'm going with something a little bit more new school cool, so let's put on some new grips on there. Now first I tried just to spit in my hand and get that on there, but it just couldn't work. There wasn't enough lubrication. So, pulled that off. That was no good. So then we just did it properly. Got us a glass of water, a little Q-tip. Just wet that up, and we were good. Takes a few tries, but there she is. Now already we could tell that the look of the bike had just changed so dramatically, and we're really happy with how it was all coming along. And at this point, you're pretty much just doing the opposite of everything you've done up until now. So you're going to get those parts all back on there. You're going to want to make sure you got the height, keeping in mind where you're going to be sitting, making sure that your fingers are at the right angles, because you want to be able to, for example, easily hit that horn. If it's a matter of saving your life, you don't want it to be kind of awkwardly positioned too tall or too low for where your thumb reaches out to. You're going to be using your T27 and T25 Torx drivers to put it all back together again. Sadly, I couldn't finish how the end of the bike looked because my battery ran out on the camera. But suffice it to say, we were really happy with this job. The cables were too long. It was something that we can think about for the next time, but
you have a low battery warning.